with phase 3 for your hands-on. But I want to start now with your hospitality lectures. Okay, so this is, ito na yung last part of your online classes. So, we will discuss parang an overview of tourism, overview of hospitality, just to prep you for the hospitality industry when you get out. Okay, so pag nag-start na kayo with your internship, pag nag-start na kayo with your apprenticeship, at least alam nyo yung industry, not only for the kitchen, but for you get an overview of the entire industry. Kasi with culinary, you're not only, parang it's just a stepping stone. What you're doing in class is just a stepping stone. Okay? So a lot of you might, okay, for me, my batchmates, in our, we were, I think, 12 that completed the entire certificate course. Okay. Dalawa lang kami natuloy in the kitchen. Okay. The others went into different areas, but still related sa management. So hindi na siya nagluluto. Okay. Some went into events and event coordinator or specific hotels. Okay, so still part of the industry, at specific kitchen. So when we now stepping, some of you might further passion into cooking. Okay, some of you lack better understanding of
Fuck.
humor. Okay, so kunyari from now, from culinary to kitchen to become a GM of a hotel in Pampanga. So ang dami ko nang inikot. Now I'm teaching. So parang so talagang umikot na. Now I'm sharing all of the things that I'm learning. So some of you might use this lang as a stepping stone. I still have my old staff na ngayon they started with me as apprentice, as interns lang. Ngayon they manage an entire restaurant na. Okay. These are interns na until now meron pa kami connection. Okay? So we offer your section help. Okay? This season, this time kasi of your course, we are preparing you for interviews. We are preparing you to para hindi kayo ma-shock when we bring you to a bigger scale. Now kasi you're concentrated into a small kitchen. Ang liit lang na iniikot nyo na kitchen. You guys know pretty much your chef instructors, your tiny kitchen. Pero wala pa kayong guest relations. Wala pa nag-order, wala pang ticketing, wala pa kayong budgeting. So ang dami niyo pang mai-explore in the whole industry. Okay? Some of you might just to give you, you are batch 3. Okay. So yung isang batch ko, internship application stages, a lot of them will go to, I think they chose current Costa Rica, a resort in Costa Rica, to apply They will explore a resort hotel as their first internship. Okay? So this is all preparatory para hindi kayo ma-shock with the hierarchy, with the whole visiting, hospitality, okay? Para hindi lang kayo centered on culinary. Okay? So let's do an attendance check. Everybody, can you open your cameras? Okay. Open cam. Hey, let's do a check. Attendance check. Hey, let's start with Catherine. Catherine, are you here? Okay. Eden. Eden ba na-meet ko na? Eden? Ay, Catherine ba nandito? Okay, Eden. Okay, wala. Si Eden. Si Jeff. Jeff, good morning.
Good morning, Chef.
Morning. Cyrus, morning.
Good morning, Chef. Morning po.
Morning. Gemma.
Good morning po, Chef.
Good morning. Mitz.
Good morning po,
Good morning. Sophia. Sophia. Yan.
Po.
Yan. Jay. Morning.
Chef,
Jay.
ulit niyo po.
Ano yan? Hindi pa ikaw, di. Lalapit si. Morning na. Ano ba nickname mo? Ano ba? Click to J.
Click po,
Click J,
Chef.
di ba?
Yes po, clip po, para hindi magpadikit kay
Oo
Kuya
nga.
Jerry.
Magkaiba naman kayo ng amoy, so okay lang.
Mas mabango ako,
J.
Chef.
J, and then yun pa. Mas makita dito. Keith. Good morning. Si Keith, di ako pinakapansin kahapon.
Good morning, Chef.
Snobbish pala si Keith sa personal.
Hindi naman, Chef.
Okay. Good. Noemi. Lalim. Sandra.
Good morning, Chef.
Okay, good morning. Dapat meron kayong main plate. Hindi ko kayo natatandaan. Jen.
Morning, Chef.
Good morning. Si Kathleen.
Good morning po.
Good morning. Okay. Wait, mag-ano lang ako ng screenshot for the class. Hey, everybody, kindly focus naman yung cam para medyo kita naman yung face nyo. Kathleen, can you get down a bit? Okay. Screenshot this. Okay, everybody, here's my cam. There. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Alright. Okay, pwede na kayo magpatay. May iba sa inyo nasa kama pa. Okay, wake up. Alright, and Sophia, you can close na. Si Sophia is traveling. Sophia, we can close your cam. Okay. Alright. So today we will focus on the overview or fundamentals of tourism and hospitality. Okay? So, what are our objectives? Our objective is one, we start off with a definition. Okay, what is a tourist? How do you define tourism? Okay, and then we will go into the classifications of tourism based on a US standard. Okay, so since there's a bigger probability that we will be sending you into countries that are part of this standard, we know how to categorize the difference in tourism. Okay, we will connect it to a definition of hospitality. Okay, I will give you a brief history lang on tourism, where it all started, and then what are the impacts of tourism? Okay, both positive and negative. So meron yan talaga. There's also a term that we might discuss probably on Thursday, yung sustainable tourism. Okay, so this is all about tourism, hospitality. Okay, we will move outside now of the kitchen. Okay, so that you get a better understanding of. Actually, this is focused on guests. Who are your typical guests? Okay, so not pretty much what you guys will experience, but who are your typical guests? Why are they traveling? What are they thinking? What do they want to have? So it's part of understanding our guests. Kasi our overall goal, di ba, from the start in culinary is customer satisfaction, providing customer happiness. Okay? So how do we provide them with happiness? Okay? Is to give them pretty much what they are expecting. Okay? And for us to know what they are expecting, we need to understand. Okay? So that's our goal. Okay? Let's try. Okay? Try to define tourism. Okay? If you go online, there are so many different definitions of tourism na walang single definition. Okay? There are so many people trying to define what a tourist is, that parang it covers a whole lot of circles. Kunyari, for example, there was a question, if you are a tourist in a country but you stayed there for 5 years, are you still a tourist? If you are from a different culture, okay, but you migrated to a certain country because of, sabi natin, kunwari ngayon, yung sa war in Russia and Ukraine, okay, but you needed to flee your country and transfer to a different country, are you then a tourist? Okay. If you go to a local amusement area, okay, or a museum or a landmark that is close to your area, pero never mo pa napuntahan, are you a tourist? Okay, these are questions na parang some would say yes, some would say hindi, you're still a local. If you're a local, you're forever a local. So it's hard to define what a tourist is. So for us to understand a tourist, their mindset, and then the reason why they do it, so that we can provide happiness, we need to understand the entire picture. Okay, so this is, I found a nice resource speaker, okay, online. Okay, so she will try to define what a tourist is.
Hello, Dr. Hayley Stenton here from Tourism Teacher. It's summer holiday time, I'm super excited, so I am here packing. It has been a long few months and I am ready to be a tourist. So while I've been here choosing whether to take sandals or flip-flops, it got me thinking, what actually is tourism? This summer we will be backpacking along the Silk Road. That's tourism, right? And a friend of mine is chilling on the beach all summer. That's tourism too, isn't it? But what if I told you that my friend actually lived just across the road from that beach? And what if she stayed in that beach area for a month or a year? Is she still a tourist? I was curious about what others were saying online, so I decided to do a bit of research myself. I opened up my YouTube app and I watched the top ranking videos for the term, what is tourism? And what I found was that the vast majority of videos on this topic were created by people who are not experts, they're tourists themselves or they're students, and they were super dull PowerPoint presentations robot voiceover type of videos. And the worst part, most of these videos don't even tell you what tourism is. So here I am, a fully fledged PhD with more than 15 years experience of teaching and researching in travel and tourism. So if anyone is qualified to tell you what is tourism, it's me. And actually, I think this highlights a really important point, and something that I teach my students over and over again: only use credible sources. So I have studied and taught and worked in travel and tourism for many, many years. I'm highly qualified. You can trust what I'm saying. I'm a credible source. But perhaps the person who's making the video in their bedroom, who's just sat there making videos and they're not the expert, is not the best person to trust. I will do another session on referencing and the credibility of sources, because I think this is super, super important and it underpins everything we do when we're researching and writing. So do subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for that one. And very quickly, before I do get started on telling you exactly what tourism is, I would just like to tell you a little something about the YouTube algorithm. Now, I know you're not here to learn the ins and outs of how YouTube works, but what I would like to tell you is that YouTube will not know that you're finding this video helpful or that it is useful unless you hit the like button for me. So please do go ahead before we go any further and press that like button. That will tell that my content is credible, that it is useful, and it will push me up above some of those other videos on YouTube that aren't so credible and aren't so useful to people. So go ahead, push that like button, and I will be eternally grateful. Okay, back to my packing. Oh, I mean telling you all about what tourism is. While most of us have been a tourist at some point or another in our lives, you might find yourself asking, what is tourism? And I'll tell you, actually, there is no straight-cut answer to this question. Sorry to disappoint. The tourism industry is argued to be the biggest industry in the world, employing more people than any other industry. But did you notice the way that I used the word argue? You see, the tourism industry is somewhat grey in nature. In other words, what one person might say is definitely tourism, another person might say is definitely not. I guess some things are just black and white and other things are not. And don't even get me started on this traveller versus tourist debate. It's always floating around and it's such a load of absolute rubbish. Shock! Travellers are tourists too. At least in the context of this debate anyway. But perhaps I'll make another video on that sometime in the future. Okay, have I confused you a bit? Don't worry, I'm going to explain all. Tourism is the generic term used to cover both supply and demand that has been adopted in a variety of forms and used throughout the world. Tourism essentially refers to the activities undertaken by visitors, also known as the visitor economy. The tourism industry encompasses all activity that takes place within this visitor economy. This includes activities that are directly related to the tourist, such as staying in a hotel, ordering a meal, or visiting a tourist attraction. It also includes indirect activities, such as the transport company which delivers food to the restaurant in which the tourist eats, or the laundry company that has the contract with the hotel for cleaning the bed sheets. And it's largely due to these indirect contributions that the travel and tourism industry is actually so difficult to measure and so difficult to accurately define. Tourism comes in many different shapes and sizes and many different forms. In the past couple of years, I've laid on a beach in Spain, I've backpacked through Thailand, I've survived temperatures of minus 30 degrees at the Harbin Ice Festival in China, and I've hiked through the Mendip Hills in the UK with a child on my back and another one on my front. And these are just a few examples of how I personally have been a tourist over the last few months. There are so many different ways that we can be tourists, and that's what defining tourism is no easy feat. There are so many different types of tourism. In fact, I recently posted a video about 150 different types of tourism, so you should definitely check that one out. There is some excellent travel inspiration right there. Anyway, I digress. From mass tourism to niche tourism, domestic tourism to international tourism, volunteer tourism to suicide tourism. There are many different ways that we can be tourists. And whilst there are so many different types of tourism, essentially they all come under the same tourism umbrella. This is because they all revolve around the visitor economy and they all feed the visitor economy in one way or another. Tourism is a phenomenon with no universally accepted definition. This is because it's complex and it's unique and it's individual. Like I said, it's kind of a grey area. You might be thinking, why does it even matter how we define the term tourism? Well, it kind of does, actually. You see, if different countries want to work together, if different areas of the industry want to work together, but they define tourism in different ways, this makes things a bit complicated. It makes it hard to plan, it makes it hard to account for things. If one country thinks someone is a tourist and another country says they're not, it makes things messy and complicated. The most widely used definition of tourism was written by the World Trade Organization and the United Nations Statistics Division back in 1994. Here it's noted that in order to qualify as a tourist, one must travel and remain in a place outside of their usual residential environment for at least one night and not more than one consecutive year for leisure, business or other purposes. So are you telling me when I went to Windsor Castle, that's 30 minutes down the road from my house, I wasn't a tourist, but the Americans and the Italians and the other nationalities who booked a hotel, they were? And what about the time when I went to Brighton for the day? I just wanted to relax on the beach, but I commuted there and back, so I wasn't a tourist then either. And what about the time that I went backpacking for 13 months? Was I not a tourist in the last month? Was I not a tourist the whole time because it lasted more than 12 months? This definition has serious flaws if you ask me. Matthewson and Wall also attempted to define the term tourism back in 1982. These guys do not impose a time frame. Rather, they state that one must travel to a destination temporarily. And Leiper, in 1979, believed that defining tourism is more complex than this, proposing that there are three approaches that can be taken. The economic stance focuses on tourism as a business. The technical stance focuses on the tourist in order to provide a common basis by which to collect data. And the holistic stance attempts to include the entire essence of the subject. Whilst definitions like this might be quite useful in terms of academic literature, in a practical sense, not so much. Like I said, it's a grey area. In fact, Novelli published a book on niche tourism. It's a great book, by the way. You should check it out. I have put the link down in the reading list below. In this book, they explain the way in which tourists have developed as consumers. We have become increasingly sophisticated in our needs and preferences. We want different things and new things from our tourist experiences, many of which may not neatly fit within the predefined limits of the travel and tourism industry. And just a few days ago, an academic suggested that if you do not leave home, you are not a tourist. Well, if you ask me, that is massively outdated and that is so wrong. But if you look at those definitions we've just covered, that is what they suggest. But seriously, virtual tourism? You don't leave home for that, do you? We live in the 21st century now. So much of our lives is online, including, in some cases, tourism. People do know that these definitions are outdated. They do understand this, but what I find really surprising is that nobody has attempted to create a more modern, a more up-to-date version. If there is a definition that I don't know about, please tell me. Please leave it in the comments because I haven't seen it and I'd love to know. But as far as I'm aware, there aren't any. So I thought it might be fun to play a little game. Why don't you guys, based on everything that I've taught you, create your...
Okay, so even your PhD in tourism is having a hard time defining a tourist or defining tourism. Okay, so they had to create a unifying body, which is called the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO. And its goal is to define and categorize tourism, create sections, create categories to clearly define what a tourist is. Okay, so and for them, tourism is a social, cultural, and economic phenomenon, okay, which entails movement of people to countries or places outside their usual environment. Okay, so it needs to have a social, a cultural, and economic impact. Okay, so we will discuss each of the three impacts of tourism in a later slide. Okay, so if you are somebody that you need to travel even through commute or to take a bus, take a train, to be able to view a new location and then learn something from this other culture, from this other place. Kahit nasabi natin, from Manila kayo, you visit Bicol, you experience their food, you experience their sights, sounds. So it's a cultural experience kasi it's you are diving into this different culture. Okay? You also socialize. Okay? So you also mingle with other people from that area. Okay? And then your travel, if will bring in a boost in economy kasi people do it to taste their food. So yung food nila are being purchased. So if we use the definition of tourism, okay, it should have a social, cultural, and economic impact. It involves movement of people, okay, outside of their usual environment. Okay, it covers both business and pleasure reasons why people travel. Okay, so regardless if they're traveling because of business reasons or pleasure reasons, okay, or visiting or just a vacation, okay, it falls under your tourism. Okay, so this should give you an overview, your UNWTO. Okay, so it's a United Nations agency promoting responsible and sustainable and universally accessible tourism. Ang key ngayon is sustainable tourism. We need to understand what sustainable tourism is. Okay, so we will have it, I think, on Thursday or next week, but it involves balancing of the positive and negative impacts of tourism. Okay, highlighting on the positive and reducing as much of the negative impact of tourism to make tourism in small or areas sustainable as compared to big, large countries. Okay? So, from the same organization, okay, UNWTO, they have break down the different types of tourists. Okay? So, meron kang domestic tourist. Yung, di ba, for us, ang dami nating islands, ang dami nating pwedeng locations to go to. Okay? So, we are considered tourists, domestic tourists in our own land. Okay? You have your inbound tourists. Okay, non-residents traveling to a given country. So, kayo papasok. Okay. Outbound are the ones traveling to another country. So, palabas naman sila. Okay? So, clear naman, medyo simple naman yung definition. Okay? So, this is included in domestic tourism or the domestic tourists. Okay? Kasi marami kasi nagta-travel locally, okay, within their own country. Okay, the tourism industry, okay, is there to cater for the customer satisfaction of these tourists, both inbound, outbound, and domestic. Okay, so ano ba yung coverage of the tourism industry? Hindi lang tayo part ng hotel. Okay, hindi lang siya restaurants or resorts kasi dyan tayo usually nagsistay. So accommodations is part of it. Recreation, entertainment. Okay, people who travel to go to Disneyland, people who go to amusement parks, to recreational parks. Okay, these are part of tourism. Marami ngayon yung mga open farms, yung mga kiddie farms, animal farms. These are part of tourist spots. Okay, kasama rin dito is transportation. Okay, yung people go to or riding the bullet train. Okay, that's part of tourism. Your provincial, di ba, if you go to the beach, meron yung mga for rent na bikes. These are part of transportation tourism. Okay, riding the train, riding the bus, cruise liners are part of transportation tourism. Okay, and then travel services. Anything related to moving people around. They're part of tourism. Okay? With accommodations, meron pa itong sub-branches. Okay? Kasi with accommodations, all of the things that they do is to provide happiness to tourists. Okay? To guests. Okay? So kasama dito, F&B, housekeeping, janitorial services, security services. Okay, all of these events planning, all of these are key important departments that fall under your tourism industry. Okay, so hindi lang kitchen, okay, ang kasama sa hospitality or hindi lang sa dining. Kasi ang nakita natin world is front of house, back of house. There are so many other departments that cover tourism. And all of these industries or all of these departments are there, are developed, are created to provide happiness to your tourists. Okay? So what's the origin of tourism? Okay, if we go back, people are naturally built to move. Okay, so hindi naman tayo parang plants na we just stay in one area. Okay, we grow, we get the sun, we get water. Okay, we are naturally born to move or created to move. Okay, we follow historically, if you look at ancient times, we follow where food was abundant. So we constantly move, we travel. Okay, it's just on during the 17th century, okay, na nagkaroon ng shift into this tourism. Okay, nag-shift into this movement which we now call tourism. Okay, tourism was defined in the 17th century as travel for leisure purposes. Okay, so yung for pleasure lang talaga siya. Okay, hindi pa counted ang business as part of tourism. Okay, so since it was a leisurely activity, only the royals can afford it. Okay, it was grand to travel. They had it was expensive. They had to bring a lot of people. So it was only for the royals, reserved for the upper classes and the royals. They're the only ones who can travel for leisure. Okay? And then eventually, because of this traveling, because of this traveling for leisure, this is where you can see the birth of hospitality. Okay, so nauna yung travel. Okay, so people would travel pero walang nag-accommodate sa kanila, walang bibigay sa kanila na service. Travel lang sila, experience, and then go back. Okay, they saw that people would travel more if when they get to a certain destination, they are being served. Okay, so it started naman, okay, creating this hospitality industry. Okay, similar to what we know. So may mga food offerings na siya. Okay, meron ng accommodations, rooms, service, butler service. So all of these started kasi nakita nila there was a demand for service. There was a demand for somebody to serve the royals. So that mas pleasurable yung travel nila. Okay? Eventually, because of technology, because of advancement in transportation, nagkaroon na ng railroad system, so nagkaroon na ng cars, nagkaroon na ng ships, ng boats. So travel was not only for the royals, but even normal people, average people can actually afford it. So the tourism industry started to grow. So a lot more people started traveling. So nakita mo yung demand naman in hospitality na ang dami nang dumadating. So let's build more of these accommodations, more of these food establishments, more of the F&B, more establishments to serve all those travelers. Okay, so connect sila lahat. Okay. Eventually, your tourism became a business. Okay, so ang first travel agency was yung Cox and Kings. Okay, it's owned by Richard Cox, and it was officially the travel agent of the Kings, so British Royal Armed Forces. Okay, ganun na name niya, Cox and Kings. Okay, so from the 1758, okay, so they opened their travel agency. From there, ang dami ng advancement. So the 18th century naman, travel leisure naman yung open for agency for travel leisure. And then eventually it continued, you see more and more people offering this type of business. Okay? So one of the biggest, now kasi medyo normal na yan, di ba? Everybody can book online, everybody can check their travel itinerary or create their own. Okay? Meron mga tour groups that they can be involved in. So ang dami mo ng options ngayon. Okay? I will focus on transportation tourism. Okay? So yung one of the biggest transport services that offers tourism in the modern age are your cruise liners. Okay, some of you, okay, might be lucky enough to enter into a cruise liner. Okay, but when you are in a cruise liner, usually contract is nasa 6 to 8 months. Okay, so kasi that's the entire journey of your cruise liner. Okay, so hindi kayo pwedeng hindi kayo pwedeng mag-resign in the middle kasi iiwanan kayo kung nasan man yung cruise liner nyo. Okay, so your contract usually spans for a couple of months. Okay, and then after that straight duty, 8 months, they give you a month or 2 months rest, and then again you go back to the ship. Okay, so I will show you what a cruise liner, okay, not from the point of view of the kitchen, okay, but in general, how it all started and how grand this type of tourism is.
Cruise tourism is big business. So big, in fact, that in 2009, before the COVID crash, the global cruise industry welcomed 29.7 million passengers. It created jobs for 1.8 million people around the world, and it contributed over 154 billion US dollars to the global economy. Cruise tourism is essentially a form of enclave tourism, and it encompasses all phases of the tourism industry. There's accommodation, transport, hospitality, attractions. It's got it all. Cruising has become the fastest growing segment in the travel industry across the world. And it's no surprise with the wide variety of cruises that are on offer these days. Cruise tourism is hugely popular around the world, but it's not all good and it can have some pretty negative impacts that need to be managed. Interested to learn more? Stay tuned. If you're new here, my name's Dr. Hayley Stainton and I'm here to teach you all things travel and tourism. So let's start at the beginning. What is cruise tourism? Cruise tourism refers to holidays which are entirely or partly based on a cruise ship. It enables tourists to experience a multi-centre holiday, whereby they spend time at various destinations throughout their trip. Cruise ships vary from small yachts to megaships and can take place on the ocean, rivers or fjords. Cruise tourism is popular in the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, the Arctic and lots of other places too. In essence, cruise tourism is a luxurious form of travelling, usually anyway. It involves an all-inclusive holiday on a cruise ship that lasts at least 24 hours, and it has a set and specific itinerary in which the cruise ship will call at different ports or cities. Cruise tourism is characterised by the concentration of large numbers of people who visit one particular destination all at the same time. Has cruise tourism always been big? Actually, cruise tourism does have a long and fruitful history. The first notable leisure cruising began with the formation of the Peninsula and Oriental Steam Navigation Company back in 1822. Whilst the company started out as a shipping line, it soon introduced round trips to a range of destinations. Over the next century, more and more cruise liners began to emerge around the world, and by the late 19th century, Albert Ballin, director of the Hamburg America line, was the first to send his transatlantic southern cruises during the worst of the winter season of North Atlantic. Fast forward to the 1980s and we started to see the development of cruise ships that look closer to what we recognise today. The first megaships were built and cruise ships gradually became bigger and more luxurious, with more onboard facilities than ever before. Nowadays, some modern cruise ships are so big that they cater for a capacity the size of a small city. Cruise ships have a wide range of onboard facilities and features, and there are cruise ship itineraries that cater for every type of person in every corner of the globe. So who organises these cruises? Let's take a look at some of the big names in the cruise tourism business. The cruise market is largely dominated by the big.
Okay, so in terms of partnerships, we have partnerships with some of these cruise. There are five major cruise companies. Okay, so we have partnerships with these ones, and hopefully some of you would like to apply into a cruise liner.
Big five names. We have Cunard, who have been operating for more than 180 years. They specialise in luxury cruises with their famous White Star service. This formal and traditional cruise company is ideal for couples and for the older generation. Then we have Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean Cruises are the leading cruise company for innovation. They offer everything from surfing to Broadway shows. It's really exciting. The cruise line is popular amongst a wide range of cruise tourists, including families, couples and solo travellers. We then have P&O Cruises. This is the most popular cruise line in the UK. It appeals to a range of customer types, including families and couples. It offers traditional cruise products and services. Another big player is the Norwegian Cruise Line. It's really popular with UK cruise tourists as well as Europeans, and Norwegian Cruise Lines offers an American-style service on board their ships. You can sail from the UK, or you can book a fly cruise, where you fly and then join your cruise ship. Princess Cruises are another big company, and they offer sailings around the world using a traditional American-style cruise approach. Princess Cruises are popular the world over with couples, families, and premium travellers. So the cruise ships themselves are pretty remarkable. They have some incredible facilities on board, and some of them are really big. Currently, the largest cruise ship is the Symphony of the Seas, measuring more than 1,000 feet in length, and with a gross tonnage of 228,081 across 18 decks. This ship is quite frankly an engineering marvel. The ship is able to accommodate 5,518 passengers at double occupancy, up to a maximum capacity of 6,680 passengers, as well as a 2,200 person crew. The Symphony of the Seas has everything you would expect from the largest cruise ship in the world. The cruise ship has 18 decks, 22 restaurants, 24 pools, 2,759 cabins, and a park with over 20,000 tropical plants. But this ship will not be the biggest for long. Royal Caribbean International has announced that it will begin operations of its new Wonder of the Seas in 2022. This ship will measure 1,188 feet and it will be 217 feet wide. It will feature 18 decks and 2,867 staterooms. Wonder of the Seas will sail 7-night itineraries to the Eastern and the Western Caribbean. So let's take a deeper look at what things are on board these ships, because they are pretty cool. Cruise ships are pretty incredible. They will often have everything you could want on board. In fact, lots of them are just like a small city. It's fairly common among modern cruises for the following facilities to be found on board: a range of shops, a casino, a spa, swimming pools, theatres, cinemas, fitness centres, restaurants and bars. And whilst I have told you all about the biggest cruises in the world, there are actually lots of different types of cruise. So let's take a look at what these are. River cruise. Many destinations are popular for river cruising. River cruising is different from ocean cruising because Passengers are really close to shore, and the focus of the cruise is more on sightseeing and visionary landscape. During river cruises, passengers tend to step offshore, and these excursions are typically free of charge. The facilities on board a river cruise are kept to a minimum, and they're generally restricted due to the smaller size of the ship. Of course, it needs to fit down the river. Typically, river cruise ships will hold no more than 100 to 200 passengers, whereas ocean cruises can hold thousands. Expedition cruise. Expedition cruising is smaller in its scale, offering niche experiences with shore landings via an inflatable boat to access remote locations. The purpose of expedition cruising is to take part in a comprehensive adventure and educational experience. More often than not, expedition cruises specialise in voyages that offer nature or wildlife-based experiences in areas like Northern Europe, Alaska, or the Arctic. Mega cruise. Mega cruises are the biggest cruise ships yet, including ships such as the Symphony of the Seas and Norwegian Bliss. Mega cruise ships are a new class of cruise vessel, and they focus on maximising capacity and onboard services. Some megaships can hold more than 5,000 passengers. The Oasis series, built by Royal Caribbean International, Oasis, Allure, Harmony and Symphony of the Seas, can each hold around 6,700 people. Yacht. Yacht cruising is particularly small in scale when we compare it to luxury or mega cruising. However, yacht cruising can be similar to luxury cruising in that it is very expensive and it can have very high standards of service and facilities on board. Yachts hold fewer passengers than other cruise vessels, and usually a family or a group of people will hire an entire yacht and cruise the seas. There are many places that are really popular for this type of cruise tourism, such as Greece or the Whitsundays in Australia. Luxury cruise. Many types of cruise that we have talked about here can also be considered luxury. Luxury cruises tend to have a lower staff to passenger ratio and a premium class of service throughout. And the sky is the limit when it comes to pricing. Okay, so this all sounds pretty fun, right? But where? Where are people going? The Caribbean. Caribbean cruises are a popular choice for cruise tourists, as the weather in the Caribbean is generally good all year round. Whilst the cruise tourism industry in the Caribbean is large, the economic and environmental impacts are often the centre of discussion amongst academics and practitioners. It's definitely something to consider, and I will talk about that more shortly. The Mediterranean. Similarly to the Caribbean, the Mediterranean has always been a very popular cruise destination. Particularly, this is the case because it has a warm climate in most parts all year round. And there are so many great places to visit around the Mediterranean, from Barcelona to Venice to Malta and more. The Nile. As I mentioned earlier, river cruising is becoming an increasingly popular choice of cruising amongst cruise tourists. And the Nile has become a very popular destination for this. There are many ways to cruise the Nile. Cruise packages range from luxury cruises to something more cut back and affordable. Cruises vary in duration too, but most commonly they last between 3 to 7 days. The Nile cruise has been deemed as one of the world's best cruises, and it's a fantastic way to see what Egypt has to offer. The Yangtze. Being the world's third longest river, it's no surprise that it's also a popular river cruise destination. Almost 100 different cruise ships operate along the Yangtze. This is an amazing way to soak up some of the sights of rural China, and is particularly popular with Chinese domestic tourists. The Round the World cruise. Round the World cruises are quite literally cruises that travel around the world. Around the World cruises are probably the most expensive type of cruise that you can do. They generally cost anything up from around £9,000. Some of the most luxury round the world cruises can cost up to £200,000 per person. These cruises typically last around 90 to 120 days, and they allow for passengers to embark and disembark in various different places around the world. The Arctic. Arctic cruising is often referred to as a form of extinction tourism, whereby passengers travel to the Arctic to observe the distinct wildlife or culture while it's still there. Most people who take an Arctic cruise are wealthy adventure seekers, wishing to explore the natural wildlife and landscapes of remote locations. So, as I mentioned earlier, cruise tourism is very popular and it is continuing to grow. This industry not only makes a large amount of income directly, but also it makes a lot of income through its partnerships and integration with other parts of the tourism industry. However, it's not always as good as it seems. The reality is that this economic benefit is absorbed predominantly by the large corporations who own these cruise ships, and there is very little economic benefit of cruise tourism to the destinations that host the tourists. Because their every need is catered for on board, cruise tourists typically spend very little money in the destinations that they visit, meaning that the local people reap few rewards for this type of tourism. In addition to this, cruise tourism can have devastating impacts on the natural environment when ships dock in shallow waters or when garbage is not disposed of responsibly. And last but definitely not least, large numbers of tourists visiting a destination at one time can have adverse effects, with over-tourism being a distinct problem around the world that often results from cruise tourism. So cruise tourism is big, it's exciting, but it does have some negative impacts too that really need to be managed a little bit better, I would say. Are you a cruise tourist? What do you like about cruise tourism? Let me know in the comments. And watch this one next.
This year, I won't settle for one.
Okay, so that's how big your cruise tourism is. Okay, so it's given the that we are slowly opening this type of tourism. So mas malaki, mas maraming openings for internship and apprenticeship in just to mention for tourism will have different types of impact also. Okay.
Bago mo record na
Okay, so you're as part of the definition of
siguraduhin mo na may
tourism,
player sila katulad dun sa baba saka yung hindi
it
nila
covers
hindi kasama yun.
social, cultural, okay, and environmental impacts, both positive and negative.
Bibilhin yun, di ba?
Okay, so we will discuss
Dapat alam din nila hiwalay yung sa
probably each one, but
installment.
I will focus
Kahit saan
on
ganun walang hiwalay.
mostly the negative side. Okay? Because yung positive side,
alam nila kasi
pretty much
baka
given already.
may
How
pera sila.
how tourism boosts the economy,
Tapos yung
how
isipin mo muna wag kang masyadong
tourism
yan.
can affect
Bubutasan
social
yun,
and
papaalam mo sa
cultural
inyo,
changes.
tawag ka muna kung paano.
Okay, so influences,
Di ba pupunta
and
sa
then
Lumas?
how it affects environment. Okay,
Electric one
so
nila.
we will focus on some of the negative sides of tourism. Okay. So with the economy, okay, so given the number of tourists entering and traveling, so you see a lot of increase in travelers, but also increase the demand for service. So it increases yung
Yun nga, tinatanong.
demand for people in the hospitality industry. So it creates jobs when you have
yung kahit kaya nakaka-internet ka sa baba, meron
Dito na
yan.
lang ako. Hintayin lang kita.
okay, so they make this whole 2 years pandemic develop. You can see a lot of businesses shutting down because they couldn't travel, they cannot because of safety, okay, they cannot open their gates. Okay, so a lot of these businesses had to shut down temporarily. Okay, so because
Init
of the
na yan,
pandemic,
masanay ka.
it was damaging some of the economic effects of tourism. Okay, but if you you can see that the economy is starting to reopen. Okay, so more people are traveling, more and more people are uh, booking for accommodations or traveling to not only uh, domestic spots but also international. Okay, so you can see that there's a growing need for people in the tourism industry. Okay, so even for our internship program, parang in the past 2 years, okay, so medyo konti lang yung demand kasi they were laying off people nga, so they cannot bring in more people. Pero now there's a surge of not COVID but surge in demand because a lot of people are already traveling and konti lang understaffed sila. Maraming mga hotels na understaffed ngayon. So nagmamadali sila in getting apprentices and interns and trainees and new staff, new hires to bridge the demand of the tourists and yung service supply nila. Okay? So, eksakto lang yung timing of your course kasi once you start applying for your internship, there's a high demand now for people in the hospitality industry. Okay? So, make sure that you do good in the interview. Okay? Another impact of tourism is yung social and cultural impact. Okay? But as diba, when we travel, we experience a lot, we experience the culture, we get to understand different types of people, we get to understand how they think, how they move, okay? But there's also a negative impact socially of tourism, okay? So may mga ibang tao that make tourism, parang they do not respect the cultures, okay, of certain destination. For example, if you do your research, in America, they welcome a lot of tourists. But in Iceland, they don't allow too much tourists. Okay, so why? Because in Iceland, they see that tourists do not follow even the local rules and regulations or law. Okay, one of the laws that is commonly broken by tourists in Iceland specific, okay, is the use of their comfort room. Okay, in Iceland, it's parang you need to pay to use the bathroom. Okay, because it's part of yung cleanliness. How to keep it clean, so they need to pay people. So it's part of cleanliness that you need to pay to use the bathroom. Okay? Eh marami tourists down that they don't want to pay, they're sanay na, they're not, ito ka magbabayad, it's just a bathroom, it's supposed to be something free, if you're used to a country that gives you free access to bathroom, and then when you enter Iceland, you become deprived, okay, and then you need to pay every time you need to go to the bathroom. So ang dami daw tourists that they just pee wherever, okay, so they can see mga people pa nga doing number 2 in open parks. Tatago lang sila. Okay? So ganon, parang it's destroying, yes, tourism can bring in more people, can bring in more jobs, pero it also has their social and cultural impact. Okay? So nasisira nila yung, they do not follow the norm of where they're doing. Another example is when people go to indigenous areas, okay, they try to bring in their modern techniques, their modern parang tinuturuan nila ng modern things. Yung indigenous people, okay, yes, you're healthy, but you also need to respect the culture that you're entering into. Okay? So hindi pwedeng sila yung lagi nag-a-adjust to tourists. Okay? So you need to keep some of the indigenous traditions. Okay? And it's part of their identity, it's part of their values. Okay? So you see that tourism doesn't only impact in the positive note. Okay? Okay. So let's see what are some of the social and cultural impacts, both positive and negative, of tourism.
The tourism industry has the power to do a lot of good. In fact, it has the power to change the world. It can help to bring people out of poverty, to put food on the table and to pay the medical bills. It can help to preserve ancient cultures, maintain religious buildings and revitalise culture and art. It can help to support and strengthen communities. But the travel and tourism industry can also cause a lot of harm. It can cause people to stop speaking their native language, to alter the way that they dress, to destroy culture and heritage, and to encourage people to turn to crime, gambling and drugs. These are the social impacts of tourism. If you've ever studied sustainable tourism management, you will know that it consists of 3 pillars: the environment, the economy, and society. In order to ensure that we have a long-lasting and sustainable tourism industry throughout the world, we must ensure that we minimise the negative impacts of tourism and maximise the positive impacts of tourism. My name is Dr. Hayley Stainton from tourismteacher.com, and today I'm going to teach you all about the social impacts of tourism. And if you do want to learn a little bit more about the social impacts of tourism, I have provided a recommended reading list down in the description below. The social impacts of tourism, also commonly referred to as socio-cultural impacts, are the effects on host communities that have direct or indirect relations and interrelations with tourists and the tourism industry. In other words, it's the way that the business of tourism impacts society. Tourism is, at its core, an interactive service. This means that host-guest interaction is inevitable. This can have significant social or social-cultural impacts. These social impacts can be seen as benefits or costs. So they can be good social impacts or bad social impacts. Travel and tourism can do some great things around the world, and it can have really positive social impacts. So let's start off this video by looking at the good things that can come from tourism. One of the biggest social benefits of tourism is the preservation of local culture. It is the local culture that the tourists are often coming to visit when they travel. Tourists visit Beijing to learn more about the Chinese dynasties. Tourists visit Thailand to taste authentic Thai food. Tourists travel to Brazil to go to the Rio Carnival, just to mention a few. As a result, many destinations will make a special effort to preserve and protect the local culture. This often contributes to the conservation and sustainable management of natural resources, protection of local heritage, and a renaissance of indigenous cultures, cultural arts, and crafts. In one way, this is absolutely great. But I can't help wondering, is it natural? Our social settings have changed tremendously over the years. In the UK, we don't walk around in corsets and Victorian dresses anymore, do we? We have evolved socially over the years, and this is completely natural. So I can't help but wonder, is it right that destinations stay in one place for tourism? They don't evolve, they don't change like the rest of us? I don't have the answer, but it's something for you to ponder on. Anyway, I digress. Another positive social impact of tourism is the ability for the travel industry to help strengthen communities. Events and festivals, of which local residents have been the primary participants and spectators, are often rejuvenated and developed in response to tourist interest. I certainly felt this myself when I went to the Running of the Bulls festival, known as San Fermin, in Pamplona, Spain. The atmosphere there was just explosive. It was an incredible experience. And the jobs created by tourism can also be a great boost for the local community. Aside from the positive economic impacts created by enhanced employment prospects, people with jobs are happier and more social than those without a disposable income. Local people can also increase their influence on tourism development. Tourism can help to increase their prospects in terms of their job and how much they might earn, and it can help them to undertake professional training and development of business and organisational skills. The tourism industry requires many facilities and infrastructure to meet the needs of the tourists. This often means that the developments in an area as a result of tourism will be available for use by the locals too. Local people often gain use of new roads, new sewage systems, new playgrounds, bus services, and lots more, all as a result of tourism. And this can only be a good thing, right? This can provide a great boost to their quality of life and is a great example of a positive social impact of tourism. Tourism can see rise to many commercial businesses, which can be a positive social impact of tourism. This helps to enhance the community spirit, as people tend to have more disposable income as a result. These businesses may promote the local culture and arts, whether it's a museum exhibiting artifacts from throughout Egyptian history, a traditional dance show in Thailand, or an art gallery lot. Attractions such as these are popular with tourists and they help to promote and profit from the culture and arts that the destination has to offer. And some destinations will encourage local cultures and arts to be revitalised or reborn. Today there are some fantastic virtual tours that allow tourists to time travel in order to see how ancient monuments would have once looked. There are destinations that will put on shows to demonstrate ancient practices and traditions that may since have died out and been forgotten about. This type of tourism is great because it helps to promote traditions and histories that may otherwise have become distant and lost. Many tourists will visit a destination especially to see its local heritage. It is for this reason that many destinations will make every effort to preserve its heritage. This could include putting restrictions in place or limiting tourist numbers if necessary. This is a great example of careful tourism planning and sustainable tourism management. But unfortunately, there are also a lot of negative social impacts of tourism, and it's really, really important that we take note of these and try to mitigate these where we can. Whilst some people will argue that social change is inevitable and natural, there is no disputing that travel and tourism has helped to fuel this in many parts of the world. And unfortunately, there are many changes that come about as a result of tourism that are not desirable. There are many examples throughout the world where local populations have changed because of tourism. African tribal people have exchanged their traditional dress for football shirts. Almost everyone on the island of Bali now speaks English. There are people in Jamaica who choose to make a living by stealing from the tourists. These are all examples of negative social impacts of tourism. Let's start off by looking at the issue of globalization. Globalization is the way in which the world is becoming increasingly interconnected. We are losing our individuality and gaining a sense of global being, whereby we as people are becoming more and more alike than ever before. Globalization is inevitable in the tourism industry because of the interaction between tourists and hosts. Typically come from different geographical and cultural backgrounds. It is this interaction that encourages us to become more alike. Let me give you a couple of examples that I have experienced personally. A few years ago, I went on a trip to the Goan jungle. As part of this trip, we were given a tour of a local village, where many of the tourists offered candy to the local children. These children had rarely been exposed to areas outside of the jungle, and had it not been for the tourists, they would never have been exposed to these sweets that were absolutely not Goan or Indian. I'll give you another example. When I went to the Gambia a few years back, I met a young boy who was working with the tourists. He was wearing a Manchester United football shirt, and I asked him, where did you get the shirt from? He told me he was donated that t-shirt from a tourist the year before. So had that tourist had never visited Gambia, he would never have had that football shirt. And in Thailand, one of my favourite countries of the world, people are uprooting and leaving their traditional homes in the countryside to go and work in the cities. They want to work with the tourists, that's where the money's at. They learn to speak English, they start eating Western food, and their culture changes as a result. Had these people never have relocated to the city to work with the tourists, they may never have been exposed to some of the foods and some of the language and some of the behaviour that they have. Many people believe globalisation to be a bad thing, but there are also some positives. Think about this. Do you want an authentic squat toilet in your hotel room? Or do you want a Western toilet? Are you happy to eat rice and curry for breakfast, or would you really just prefer your bowl of cornflakes? Do you want to struggle to get by when nobody can communicate in English, or are you just desperate to have just that one English-speaking person to help you along the way? When we travel, most tourists want that sense of familiar to some extent, and globalisation helps us along the way. Authenticity is essentially something that is original or unchanged. It's not fake, it's not reproduced in any way. In the Western world, many people believe that a tourist destination is no longer authentic when their cultural values and traditions change. But I would argue, is this not natural? Are we not supposed to evolve and change? Take a look at the likes of the Long Neck tribe in Thailand, or the Maasai tribe in Africa. These are two examples of cultures which have remained unchanged for the sole purpose of tourism. They appear not to have changed in the way that they dress, the way that they speak, or the way that they act for generations, for all for the purposes of tourism. To me, however, this begs the question, is this actually authentic? In fact, is this not the exact opposite of authentic? The rest of the world have modern electricity and iPhones. They watch TV. They buy their clothes in the nearest shopping mall. But because tourists want an authentic experience, in inverted commas, these people have not moved on with the rest of the world, but instead have remained the same. I also think there is an ethical discussion to be had here, but we can leave that for another day. In fact, I think authenticity is a great topic to study, and it can really get your mind working, and it can be quite mind-boggling. So I have written a couple of articles on authenticity, and I'll put the links down below for you. Many destinations risk standardisation in the process of satisfying tourists' desires for familiar facilities and experiences. Whilst landscape, accommodation, food, drinks, etc. must meet the tourist's desire for the new and the unfamiliar, they must at the same time not be too strange, because few tourists are actually looking for completely new experiences. Just like that toilet example that I told you before. Do you really want to squat in your toilet in your hotel room? Tourists are often on the lookout for recognisable facilities in an unfamiliar environment, like well-known fast food restaurants and hotel chains. Tourists like some things to be standardised, like the toilet, their breakfast, speaking English, but they want other things to be different. We like to try different food, we like different weather, we like to listen to different music, visit different tourist attractions. But do we want everything to become standardised? I know I certainly miss seeing the small independent shops on the high street. They've all been exchanged for multinational corporations and chains. I personally think the tourism industry stakeholders need to proceed with caution when it comes to standardisation. Sure, give the tourists that sense of familiar that they're looking for, but don't dilute the culture and traditions of the destination that they're coming to visit, because if it feels too much like home, well, they might just stay home. On a less philosophical note, another negative social impact of tourism that can have significant consequences are culture clashes. Because tourism involves the movement of people from different geographical locations, cultural clashes can take place as a result of differences in culture, ethnic and religious groups, values, lifestyles, languages, and levels of prosperity. The attitude of local residents towards tourism development may unfold through the stages of euphoria, where visitors are welcome, through apathy, irritation, and potentially antagonism when anti-tourist attitudes begin to grow among local people. This is represented through Doxy's Irritation Index, and this is a theory that I will teach you more about in a future video. Culture clashes can also be exacerbated by the fundamental differences in culture between the hosts and the tourists. There's likely to be economic inequality between locals and tourists, who are spending more money than they usually would at home. This can cause resentment from the local population towards the tourists. And when locals see tourists wearing expensive jewelry or using fancy cameras that they know they can't afford themselves, this can cause resentment and even lead to increases in crime. Further to this, tourists often, out of ignorance or carelessness, fail to respect local customs and morals and values. Think about it. Is it right to go topless on a beach when the local population don't even show their shoulders? There are many examples of ways that tourists offend the local population, often unintentional. Did you know that you should never put your back to a Buddha, or show the sole of your feet to a Thai person, or show romantic affection in public in the Middle East? A little education in this regard can go a long way. But unfortunately, many travellers are completely unaware of the social impacts that their actions might have on the host community. Crime rates typically increase with the growth and urbanisation of an area, and the growth of mass tourism is often accompanied by increases in crime. The presence of a large number of tourists with lots of money to spend, who often carry valuables such as cameras and jewellery, increases the attention for criminals, and it brings with it activities like robbery and drug dealing. And then there's sex tourism. Although tourism is not the cause of sexual exploitation, it provides easy access to it through, for example, prostitution. Therefore, tourism can contribute to rises in the number of sex workers in a given area. I've seen this myself in places such as Thailand and the Gambia. And lastly, gambling is a common occurrence as a result of tourism. The growth of casinos and other gambling facilities can encourage not only tourists to part with their cash, but also the local population too. So as I have explained throughout this video, there are many social impacts of tourism. Some are good, some are not so good. Whether you're a student, an avid traveller, or somebody who works in the travel and tourism industry. I hope that this video has helped you to think a little bit more about how your actions might have an impact on the host community that you are visiting. I also hope I've encouraged some deeper or more critical thinking in terms of issues such as globalisation and authenticity. And if you are keen to learn more about these things, I will be posting weekly videos, so make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the notification button. And don't forget to check out the reading list that I've put below too.
Okay, so I focus on the social and cultural impact of tourism. Ito kasi rarely natin nakikita. Okay, yung how it disrupts yung culture in society. Okay, how tourism also has a negative impact on culture. Yung increase in crime, increase in sex traffic, okay, increase in yung removal of the indigenous identity. Okay, these are some of the negative impacts of tourism. So hindi laging positive. So sustainable tourism is actually a you are looking for that balance where your positive is greatly bigger than the negative impacts. Okay? And then the last type of impact is your environmental. Okay, ito, kita naman natin ito, di ba? Di ba before, Boracay had to close down because of the dirt accumulated because of tourism. The tourists naman are not all foreigners. There's a majority, a big portion of Boracay tourists na from local, yung domestic tourists. Okay, so you can still see na because of tourism, it created a negative environmental impact. Okay, so nandyan yung pollution, nandyan yung construction of, before you can see how long the shoreline, yung layo ng shore from the water, yung Boracay. Because of tourism, ang dami ng buildings, ang dami ng construction, lumiit na ang shoreline ng Boracay. You can still see this type of growth in some of the beach areas. Okay, so Siargao also, before sila na-hit ng typhoon. Okay, so you can see a lot more establishments, development. Okay, and then it is disrupting yung natural environment of a certain area. Okay, so I don't need to go in deep into the environmental effects of tourism. Okay, let's focus now on Philippine tourism. Okay, kasi marami, for us, if they ask, if I'm a tourist, foreigner coming in the Philippines, where do you bring me? Usually beach lang ang sasabihin, beach lang, okay, beach. But there are so many natural beauties, okay? Since you are given a chance to intern abroad, okay? You are given a chance to learn their culture. They are also given a chance to learn the Philippine culture. Okay, so as part of local tourism, kayo yung nagiging tour guides nila, even if you are the ones traveling out now. Okay, so as part of tourism, you guys need to know what are the hotspots of the Philippines. What are some things that we need to be proud of.
The Philippines is an island nation located in the Western Pacific. The region boasts one of the world's longest combined coastlines due to the nation's 7,000 tropical islands. From pristine beaches and marvelous natural wonders to interesting historic sites and beautiful coral reefs, the Philippines pack many exciting things to see and do. Here is a look at some of the best places to visit in the Philippines. Number 10. Vigan. A visit to this town in northern Luzon is like a step back to colonial times. Horses pull carts along cobblestone streets and dark wood mansions flank the sides, as a reminder of the grand life that many enjoyed in this colonial Spanish trading post. At the time, many goods, like beeswax and gold, were traded to China for exotic Asian items. Today, the main income for this port is tourism, though the splendor from its trading history remains. Vigan has two hearts, a shopping center in the north and a business district in the south.
Olay AHA. 96% of users notice reduction in acne marks or sunspots. New Olay AHA.
9. Bohol. The huge orange eyes and tiny fingers of the minuscule tarsier serve as the spokesmodel for the island of Bohol. Just a short trip from Cebu, this area is one of the few remaining homes for this tiny primate. The unique geologic oddity of the Chocolate Hills serves as the second draw for travelers to the region. The unique mogul-like hills come with the legend of being formed by the rocks thrown by an angry giant. Many visitors to the island are, however, here to partake in the breathtaking dive opportunities that the region has to offer. Number 8. Manila. One of the most densely populated cities in the world, the Philippines' chaotic capital can be a bit hard to fall in love with at first sight. It is well worth persevering, however, as its towering skyscrapers and traffic-filled streets hide away lots of wonderful and unique places. Founded by the Spanish back in 1571, the city is set on the shores of Manila Bay, with Pasig River running through it. Old and new seamlessly mix together in Manila, as modern shopping malls lie alongside colonial-era churches and cathedrals. Full of trendy bars and artisan markets with some great nightlife, the Pearl of the Orient is certainly one of Asia's greatest mega-cities. Number 7. Donsol. Once a sleepy, laid-back fishing village, the coastal town of Donsol now hums with life as scuba divers and snorkelers come to swim with the infamous whale sharks that are found just offshore. Growing up to 12 meters long, the gentle giants are majestic to see up close, and swimming with them really is an unforgettable experience. While there is not all that much to see or do in town, Donsol is a pleasant enough place to spend a couple of days, and the surrounding area has loads of great hikes and cycle rides. Number 6. Tagaytay. Overlooking the glorious Taal Lake, Tagaytay is one of the most popular towns to visit to the Philippines, with both tourists and locals alike. Its cool mountain climate offers visitors some welcome respite from the hustle and bustle, heat and humidity of nearby Manila. As it is bordered by lots of hills and mountains, there is loads of magnificent scenery to enjoy, with Taal Volcano being the undoubted highlight. Tourist attractions in town include the Punta Santiago Lighthouse, St. Anne Shrine, and a large local flower farm.
Wala tayong bahay ah. May bahay ka, may tinigilan ka, may nakakain ka ah. Ayos ka.
Number 5. Cebu. Cebu is an island province consisting of the main island itself and 167 surrounding islands. Its capital, Cebu City, is the oldest in the Philippines and home to the nation's second international airport. The city is a smaller but similarly busy version of Manila, with many of the same urban benefits. One advantage that Cebu has is Matcan Island, featuring a premier dive site that is a short drive from an international airport. Another diving gem, the island and resorts of Malapascua, is about a 4-hour drive to the port town of Maya, and then must be accessed by boat. Number 4. Siargao. Shaped like a teardrop, Siargao, with its lush coconut groves, tranquil lagoons, and white sand beaches, is the very definition of paradise. This relatively undeveloped island is home to just a couple 100,000 residents. Without its own airport, it's tricky to get to, which makes it that much more rewarding when you finally sink your toes into its remote sands. Siargao is famed as the surfing capital of the Philippines, with 15 known surfing spots, including the celebrated Cloud 9. Surf schools and rental shops abound, and there are also opportunities for stand-up paddleboarding, snorkeling, and much more.
Inside Out. Be salon-tastic, Kate, with Pantene. Bigger and better at just 6 pesos SRP.
Number 3. Ifugao Rice Terraces. Photographers will want to have a lot of cards with them when they visit the picturesque Ifugao Rice Terraces on the island of Luzon. For 2,000 years, people have been growing rice on terraces that follow the contours of the Cordilleras Mountains. The most famous ones can be found around the town of Banoy. They were created by the Ifugao ethnic people without modern tools and are still used today. to Boracay. Boracay is one of the most popular islands in the Philippines, so much so that it had to be closed for 6 months to rehabilitate the island after its huge influx of visitors. Today it is reopened to tourists, but has a limit on the number of visitors it welcomes each day. The main allure of Boracay Island is its idyllic white beach, but there are hordes of other tiny beaches and coves where you can enjoy everything from snorkeling and scuba diving to kite surfing. Number 1. Palawan. Palawan is an island province in the Philippines that stretches from Mindoro to Borneo between the South China and Sulu Seas. Puerto Princesa, which is close to the large karst formations with an underground river, is the provincial capital. Coron Reefs is one of the best diving spots in the world, drawing divers who want to explore Japanese shipwrecks from World War II. Another popular destination is El Nido, a town sandwiched between towering limestone karst cliffs in a beautiful bay.
Okay, so these are your top 10 most famous sites in the Philippines. There are so many islands in the Philippines, and each one having their own different parang thing to highlight. Okay, so hindi lang to yung only places to go to in the Philippines. Okay, as part of tourism. Okay. You will see this type of this next video. You will see this type of tourism, okay, in the Philippines. Not only in the Philippines but around the world. This is your food tourism. Okay, so they combine the experience of taste and flavor through food and tourism. So people go around the different areas just to experience and smell, taste, cook these different types of dishes. Okay, so in the Philippines, it's a project that was handled by our Department of Tourism. This is food tourism. Okay, so in partnership with CNN.
Kaunta dire sa gilid. ito po. Tara, kain na!
Kumain ka na? Kain na tayo! Kain na! A casual calling that's distinctly and uniquely Filipino. It's a common expression, an invitation to share, to bond, and to be together. It is a true reflection of Filipino identity. It's an expression of warmth and hospitality.
Culinary tourism is already a tourism product. People go to a country because they want to taste that particular dish. Right now, it just fell into place that instead of just promoting food, you have to promote the whole country. And then I realized I want people to come here and to taste our food. And not only in Metro Manila, but to travel all over because we have 7,641 islands. And so you can imagine how much food they can taste because we ourselves know that each province has a different cuisine, a different taste. The chefs are here to discover their roots. They're really well known abroad, but then it's more for them to discover the local ingredients, what the Philippines is all about.
Food is the bond that turns strangers to neighbors, friends to family. It is the glue that keeps Filipinos together. Our food is the best way to get to know us.
What is bringing? They always say it's the Filipino way. Our cuisine is a cuisine of sharing. Look at any recipe book, a Filipino cookbook. There's not one single recipe that says this is good for one. It's always like serve 6 or 12. That's how we are. It's like it's an openness of sharing. It's important that they are reacquainting themselves, rediscovering their roots. So they will have a deeper understanding, not just like, how it tastes like, how it looks like, how it tastes, but the origins as well.
Everyone always says, if you're able to shake your farmer's hand and share a meal with him, then that's like a real plus when you yourself cook for other people. And I think more and more, especially because of the challenges that we face, precisely understanding where your ingredients are coming from, what our farmer or our purveyor does and how they grow the things, that's a real priority.
I have been inviting chefs from various parts of the Philippines whose advocacy is Filipino cuisine, so that they will see and learn and also enjoy the cuisine here and bring it back to their place, and of course to incorporate it, because I believe that food diversity in the Philippines is in.
And now, the rest of the world is starting to recognize our flavors, our dishes. In the global culinary arena, Filipino food is fast becoming a rising star. And 3 Filipino-American chefs have come back home to explore their roots. Chef Charles Olalia, known for the longaniza burger at his LA restaurant, Ma'am Sir.
As a chef that's trying to push Filipino food abroad, it gives me better confidence that there's more than just an adobo on the table. That the products that we have here is definitely world class, and what's around here gives me more confidence that we should expand and experience more of what the Philippines has to offer.
Hawaii-based chef and TV personality Lanay Tabura.
I always tell people the experience is more important to me than just the actual flavor sometimes. How much time they put into their food or how much love they put into their food. It's important to have that history behind what you're eating.
And award-winning chef Tom Cunanan of Washington, D.C.'s Bad Saint.
If one eats Filipino food, you have to understand the history in order to really understand our cuisine. This is something that I've built and respected all my life, and I still have a lot to learn about the regions and the food and the people, because I want to be a better chef, a better Filipino chef.
For me, any way to understand the country and really appreciate its culture is to first visit the market. To see not just produce.
It smells like my socks. It's okay. Cool.
But you also understand the heritage of the country, why we have these products on our shores. This is our suha or pomelo. Why the flavor profile is the way it is. Yeah, super sour. malunggay, moringa.
I love this stuff.
And also, because we're gonna make them cook, eventually, we want to see what ingredients they can also use to do their own versions of the dishes that they learn while they're.
Okay, ikaw muna. Some samples. Demo muna. Demo.
Super good. Do we use this raw or?
Growing up, we had to go and cut vegetables, we had to go fishing, we had to go diving, so I really understand it, I get it, and I think that's the best food, when it's simple and it's clean, you know, so I think that's the best way to describe Filipino food, you know, from the land, you know, and healthy and really good ingredients and strong, powerful flavors.
Like seeing all this produce like made me realize like there's so much more we can do. For me, at least, that I could use like different sour agents for sinigang, or using different fruits to make desserts. You know, it's not always strawberries and blueberries for me now.
I'm just looking forward to every adventure that every city brings. I'm just looking forward to tasting something I've never tasted before, and just furthering my knowledge of the country.
The three Philam chefs know their Filipino food, but going around the country allow them to discover some hidden gems.
Welcome, I'm Olive. I'm the founder and maker of Malagas Farmhouse. You saw the goats earlier this morning, and these are the products that we do out of the 3,000 liters of milk that we work on every week. We started making cheese because we had the milk, and I was able to get education from Swiss masters, and the thing that they told me is that you can make the Filipino cheese. Do not copy, because what you're doing here is entirely unique to your region.
She's something special, boy. I tell you, like, who would ever thought you would get such great cheese from the Philippines?
Very good. She had hard cheeses, fresh cheeses, blue cheese, wash rind blue cheese. And again, these are like cheeses that you would get in France or in Europe. And for her to have it, make it at a tropical environment and having the humidity and of course the temperatures that we have, again, amazing. The willingness to go outside the norm and to go outside the conventional ways of doing things that makes Filipinos. And I think Miss Olivia personified that today. Very impressive.
It is the artistry and the ingenuity of the Filipino. If they were able to do it in other countries, hey, we can do it in the Philippines.
Tourists that visit Malagos, they will learn how chocolates are made from tree to bar, how cacao beans are prepared, fermented and dried, sorted. See how Malagos chocolate is made. The good agricultural practices from cocoa farming is very important, and it really influences the flavor.
Can I dip my hand in there? Like Willy Wonka?
Yung buong bansa, hindi lang Davao, pero yung buong Philippines as a producer of fine chocolates, ay hindi lang siya ordinaryong tsokolate, but ito yung tsokolate na baka proud, no? Na makes them really proud to be Filipino.
More chocolate in the Philippines. There's a lot of special things here happening in Davao. You look at the items that they're creating, like the chocolate, the cheese, it's very time consuming. Things that people don't know how to do anymore. So it really shows how passionate the people are here in Davao about what they're doing and what they're involved with and what their pride for these things that they're creating for the world to enjoy, you know? These are lost arts.
Kapapangan home cook will look at a recipe. For recipe, ask for 1 tablespoon of something. Kapampangan would put 2 yung dila namin, our panlasa, our palate, is used to that taste, that intense flavor. Quintessential Pampanga dish would be a set. Is the burong hipon or any buro, fermented rice, eaten with fried or grilled catfish or tilapia or even bangus, and then the mustard leaves.
Chef Cloud, that guy is a genius. Chefs are artists, and I believe that sometimes they get into that zone and they worry about the end result and what goes into the pot. He worries about everything. He wants to share with you where you're sitting, how this table was made, where the plate came from, the ingredients and how they got there, the history behind it, the culture. And I love that.
1, 2, 3. I talked to Tom Punanan. That was the buro he grew up with in the States because his father was Kapampangan. For him, it brought back memories of his childhood with his father in the States. That is the Kapampangan. You cannot take out a Kapampangan out of him because of that buro experience.
It's all just so familiar with me. The salts and the umami you get from the buro, and it just reminds me of my dad's cooking. I want to give buro a chance to be on my menu. I grew up eating buro all my life. My dad from Pampanga. I want to represent that part of the Philippines.
So ang mga Kapampangan, at early age na-develop sa amin ang ganda, ang art ng pagluluto. Perfectionist kami. And then gusto namin masarap na nalalagyan pa ng sarap. I shared with them the Panecillo de San Nicolas, named after San Nicolas de Tolentino, said to be the patron saint of bakers. Isinir ko rin yung isang forgotten recipe ng mga Kapampangan, which is the Dulce Prenda. Konti-unti nang nalilimutan ng mga Kapampangan, ng mga Pilipino, ang mga lumang recipes. So, that's part of culture, Kapampangan culture. Bakit hindi ko i-share? But I wanted to show you how our ancestors did it 100 years back.
It's so important, especially trying to recreate like a dying art. It's like your recipes, her techniques, and having her pass the torch to us. It's a responsibility that we need to demonstrate to everyone in the world.
Chefs know the key to great food is great ingredients. That's why these chefs only go for the freshest produce and meat.
The food in Western Visayas or Iloilo is basically a very simple dish that you can really enjoy the freshest ingredients known for Iloilo cuisine. There's no such a thing as, a fusion. It's just the natural flavor that comes out with it.
The seafood is, I was blown away. I grew up on an island and I grew up eating seafood. I dive, I fish, and this place has some amazing fresh seafood, for sure.
We had fresh abalone. Oysters were amazing. These were oysters that were just picked from the ocean and just brought to our table, and it was so delicious. Mantis shrimp, you can't get that anywhere. I can't get that in the East Coast, and they're all just coming in extremely fresh, and I can't wait to eat more.
I think it's freshness. I think you can taste the freshness from the seafood and even all the vegetables. And I noticed that whenever we went somewhere, the food was brought in that day, or it was made that day. So if there was one word I had to choose, freshness.
I think it just speaks volumes of how they take care of the environment, how they take care of the culture, and how it's very much part of their lives. I have this thing that I call terroir, which is the origin of the place gives a distinct flavor to what you're eating. So that's why I feel like being here in Iloilo, eating the dishes that I thought I've tasted before, tastes so much more distinct here because of that terroir, because of the air we're breathing, because of, again, the products are totally different. And I think that's what makes every place distinct here in the Philippines.
So possibly will tell people I will never go back to Iloilo. They're feeding me like hell.
Filipino food is undoubtedly a medley of flavors that reflect the passion of those that make them.
So a lot of the organic farmers from the Philippines actually did start doing it here in Negros. The province has always been very way ahead in its advocacy for planting organic. So farm tourism has also become so much a part of what drives the tourism industry here. So you can visit people's fish farms, and I think that that's so important for us chefs.
We always observe what Mother Nature dictates, and then we adjust. Because once we protect the ponds, she will just send all the species that she can send. Everything works in an ecosystem in the farm. We don't use any artificial feeds.
Everyone in the provinces, we're zero waste. We hardly throw anything away. It's a practice that we need to kind of put attention on because it's just the way we farm.
Just the passion of aquaculture. Kiko, the head of the farm, he just showed us everything. All the nuances of the fish to the brackish waters was amazing. And then this, all the different vendors bring in their food for us to enjoy it in this one house.
My experience at Bacala was, I think it was one of the highlights so far, because there were things that I've never tried before, and I think it reminded me a lot of home.
After the 3-week tour, the chefs ended their visit like a typical Filipino party, with pabaon.
I think when you grow up in the U.S., you're familiar with adobo, pancit, and lumpia. That's it. You know, I never knew that these different regions had these different styles. I never knew that these different regions focused on that ingredient that they had an abundance of. I never knew that these chefs were so connected to their history.
I think what I learned about myself through this travel is like I know very little of the country. It makes me more thirsty for knowledge of what's around here. At the same time, it gives me more respect to the other cultures that's around the Philippines. I feel like Filipino cuisine is not a cuisine that says, love me for who I am. Filipino cuisine is something that you have to search for and you have to actually love for it to show its generosity and its beauty. And then once you love the cuisine, once you love the culture, then you will see how beautiful the country is and how beautiful the culture is.
I feel like I've taken a lot of stuff here for granted because I never had, you know, I never grew up here. I just heard about it, didn't really like study about the Filipino people, about the regions. Going to this trip, I learned so much about the Filipino people, the food, and a lot about myself. I feel like I haven't scratched the surface yet. Maybe a little bit, but not too much. And, you know, it makes me even prouder every day for me to be a Filipino.
But they're not leaving without their own pabaon as well, sharing their knowledge and skills with young aspiring chefs.
We have so many culinary students, and a lot of our culinary students, they think that to make it big, they have to cook foreign dishes. I want them to know that you can make it big, locally or abroad, by cooking Filipino dishes.
Charles is doing the lumpia that he does at Mamser, while I am doing my version of our Ilonggo lumpia.
When I meet new kids making Filipino food and I see on their pantry Kiko Man for their adobo,
it doesn't work.
I tell them don't talk to me until you start using real Filipino soy sauce.
One of the things that I fell in love with at the market, this is beautiful. We don't have this. I haven't seen it anywhere else except here.
You have to be proud of your own. You have to be proud to be Filipino. It was important for me for them to interact with the students.
What we try to do in our restaurants, in our craft, is you just get something in the market and you make something beautiful with it and don't mess with it. So it gave me appreciation for the type of cooking that actually lives in the Philippines, and that everything has to be learned from the West, that what's actually here is delicious and what's actually here is what we eventually learn over there.
To the young people who are one day want to be a chef like myself, like Chef Charles and Chef Lanai, like keep learning about yourself, about your culture, about your food, and never stop learning.
For me, I think Filipino food is the most beautiful thing out there. This is, for me, a perfect example of where we can take our food. You know,
I wish I got the education getting out when I was in high school. I never paid attention to my Lola. I never paid attention to what my mother did in the kitchen. I wish I did, and I think that's an important thing. Pay attention to your surrounding, what you have, the gardens and farms that are near you, because it's probably some of the best in the world, and learn your history and your culture, and I think you'll be a better chef.
With this visit, the chefs gained a renewed sense of respect for the simplicity of Filipino dishes.
The food has been amazing, very honest, very clean. They keep emphasizing that it's just simply prepared, but I think they can do that because they have such great ingredients here. You get it from the market, it gets cooked, and you eat it. Just the emphasis on freshness and simplicity.
And a new appreciation of their Filipino heritage.
I think that the most important thing is find out who you are and where you came from. When you learn about that, it brings a sense of pride. You can tell all the chefs we work with today have that sense of pride, that pride for Philippines.
As these renowned chefs head home, they bring with them fresh ideas to further champion Filipino cuisine in their restaurants, inviting the world to join us as they say, "Kain na!"
Okay, so that's food tourism in a nutshell. Okay, bringing the Filipino flavor outside. Okay, so you're bringing your local flavor. As mentioned in the last clip. Okay, to be successful internationally, you don't need to focus on their type of cooking. Okay, it's nice to know how to cook your Western dishes, how to cook your Mediterranean, how to cook your Spanish dishes. But we also need to be proud of how we cook our Filipino dishes. Okay, so I think, kunyari, for some of our students, okay, they actually they're done with their hands-on. Pero if I ask them to cook a simple adobo, they cannot do it. Okay, if I ask them to cook your simple laing, wala na. Kasi they're lost. They're focused on Western. They're focused on international French cuisine. They're focused on Mexican, Spanish. Pero they do not give importance to the local Filipino cuisine. Okay? So that's part of culinary. Okay? Your food tourism. Okay? So as you can see, there are so many factors in tourism. There are so many things that you guys can do. Okay? So many avenues that you guys can venture into. Okay, as I mentioned, your culinary course is just a stepping stone. Okay, this is not the complete end to end of culinary. Okay, this is just a course that will open your eyes, hopefully, to appreciate your local ingredients, or to appreciate the techniques and cooking styles. Okay, but when you are starting to travel and experience the world of culinary, you will learn a lot more things. Okay, similar to the chefs mentioned in the last clip, they already have their own businesses, they're already successful in their own restaurants, but a simple trip to the Philippines, moving around, going around, tasting different flavors, it was able to open their eyes into what they are missing in terms of the local cuisine. Okay, so that's it for our first tourism lecture. Okay, we have this last part of your curriculum. You have a listing of tourism and hospitality lectures. Okay, so I started it early. I know next week you still have a phase 3 session, but I think most of you guys know how to handle phase 3 already. So started it is para hopefully we can focus on your internship and apprenticeship in the next coming modules. Okay? So you guys have any questions regarding our intro to tourism hospitality? Everything clear? Meron ba kayong questions? Clint, may question?
Wala po siya.
None?
None, Chef.
None?
None, Chef.
None naman? None, Chef. Okay. So this is just an intro. We will still have medyo balik tayo sa theory, okay, in terms of our online modules. Okay? So if we don't have any questions regarding our intro to tourism, I will see you guys again on Thursday. Okay, so Thursday morning for another round of tourism lectures. Okay, so that's it from my end. Thank you everyone, and I'll see you Thursday.
Bye, Chef. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you guys. Okay, pabilig pala ako. Thank you guys.
Yung picture na, running na lang.